The presentation is about match preparation, specifically the last training session before the game, and how to get the most out of that session. The training session that we have running here is a real session from the archives, actually. So it's about 3 years old, the day before a Champions League match with my club. For the record, we won the match the next day, so whatever it is that we did today must have worked out pretty well, even if, as I look back at it, there are a few things that I would like to go back and change, if not fix, obviously. But there we have it. That's another part of the coaching life. We've already into Pepper here. Briefly, should say that I'm going to try to talk mostly over what you see in the screen, but that's not always going to be possible. Things are a little bit too fast, and probably I'll talk a bit too much about some different things. But anyway, the warm-up, we didn't see any of the warm-up. I edited all of that stuff out. As a general rule, we have a physical coach who's responsible for warming up the players. It's a little known fact, but players hate when people tell them how to warm up, or at least players at this level do. And so there's always a bit of a balance between when you let the physical coach do his job and give the players the freedom to organise themselves. So this being the day before a match, was indeed the players looking after themselves, and the 15 or 20 minutes of doing the things that they needed to do in terms of movements, their specific work, depending on whatever their current injury state is, and so on and so forth. We saw a little bit of Pepper in there. Would normally Pepper a little bit longer than that, but not so much. It's not one of my favorite exercises. It's not something that I particularly like to do, but for guys playing this level, it's actually how they prefer to warm up. So it's one of those fights that you choose to have or not, and I keep it to a minimum and let them 5 or maybe 6 minutes of Pepper before we get into some other stuff. If I was coaching a junior team, I most certainly wouldn't do straight Pepper like that, and in the preseason I don't. But when we are closer to the match, the players have a fair bit of, let's call it, freedom to do the things that make them feel good about preparing for what they've got coming up. The game that you saw that we're already past, I told you I wouldn't manage to speak directly over what we see, but it's we call them in Europe, we call them bugger games. Bugger being the word for underarm pass in most European languages. And as you can imagine, and as I'm sure in your own gyms, there are thousands of variations. I particularly like 2-ball games because it's a little bit more exciting. Players really like it. They tend to pay attention to it. They tend to run around. It completes the warm-up. It activates their brain, their decision making, even if they're not specific ways to the game, which isn't what we always want, but in this case it's a good fun way to start the day, and we just had a couple of little minutes in there. So this is the first drill, if you want to call it that. We're at the 5-minute mark perhaps of the video, but we're around the 25-minute mark from the start of our session. It's a pre-game day practice, so I would like or would normally have some kind of serve and reception in that. I'm not a guy who does a lot of dry repetitions of either serving or receiving. I'm not somebody who does really any blocked training at all, and this is I won't say the closest I get to it, but there might be one or two drills that I do in the course of a season that are more blocked than this. So the basic idea is that we have live serving from the whistle. I could turn the sound up, but I do all serving from a whistle. The whistle, of course, being part of the serving routine and should always be included. Again, reception is a team activity. It's not a technical activity, and so we receive in pairs. I would prefer threes, but with the number of players in the gym to pass with threes is not really practical every day. But where we do something like this, it's always at least in twos. If you are know anything about my teams, you'll notice that the people at the net are not actually players, but one is the scout man, one is the physical coach. The instructions for this particular drill, I didn't tell the players that they should also spike, but it's a good opportunity for them when they're changing ends from the after serving to have one extra spike, to have one extra dynamic movement as the training load builds up. And as it happens, it's a little bit of fun, and both of the coaches in question can at least put something up that the guys can hit, and they have some extra enjoyment from it. So that would normally go on for 10 or 15 minutes, but now we're into the main part of practice, and what we have here is my basic drill form. So I don't have a real name for it. Maybe I call it block and defense, or I can call it 2-2-2 for reasons of distribution of set from player to player. But this is the basic format of all of my learning, practicing, teaching work, and that is 6 against 6, or more likely 6. It's not 6 against 6 because I'm not scoring in these drills, but 6 players on the court with a full defense and always playing out the action to its conclusion. The key to what you get out of this, of course, is what you put in, but the origin of the first ball, or the origin of the coach's contact, is what decides where the learning, or not where, but what specific element we might be learning at the time. We don't practice with referees, and even when they don't score, they can discuss a lot about whether the ball was touched, or so on and so forth. I like it when the players are discussing in-out calls. If they're engaged in the practice, if they're engaged in what they're doing, then they care about whether it's in and out, even if maybe there's no score at any particular time. So as I said, the key in this is where the first ball comes in. So what you'll see on this day is me giving the ball directly to a setter, depending on what I wanted, and playing then from there. And the action that happens after I put in the ball is predetermined, so it has to go a certain way, and then after that is always free. We had one little, don't know how to describe it, shitty sequence just there with a net touch and a double hit. In my practices, I never stop for any ball handling or net touches unless I'm using a referee in practice, which is pretty rare. But in this case, we don't do it. My reasoning for that is pretty clear. One is that I want players to be in the habit of continuing to play under whatever circumstances. We can never control what happens in the match. We can never control referees, what they're going to call, what they're going to not call is one. One other thing is that I don't ever want players to be focused on ball handling errors, for example. I really don't like it when players will just try to avoid the ball handling error, and I never want them to be thinking about that. And from a purely practical training standpoint, I don't want to pay attention to it myself. I have other things to do than to decide if some ball is a borderline carry or throw or not. Players have different opinions on whether I should do that or not. Some teams will argue black and blue 4 or 5 times a week for the whole course of the season, even if I never make a single call. And others will let it go with making a snide remark here or there, but getting on with it. Of course, it changes if on the occasions that we do have a referee, and in those cases, the referee's call is final. So just to finish on the couple of comments about the last drill. This one is the one that is going to be running for the longest, so I'll let that run. But the most important thing in that previous drill, like all drills, is the attention and the focus of the players, that they're paying attention to the right places, they're looking in the right directions, they're making the correct automatic adjustments to the game. And that's where most of the feedback will be, especially a day like today, which is a non-competitive day, where we're just really thinking about fine-tuning some things before the game. So what I'm thinking about here is where they're looking, how they're interacting, how they're communicating, the things they're saying to each other between the rallies, during the rallies, rather than necessarily the in, out, who won the last point, and so on. And that's my explanation for why some of it looks a little bit rough, and I'm going to stick to that explanation. Also because it's true. So this is the second main drill that I do the day before a game. The day before the game, or the object of the entire training week, is basically to prepare to be in great shape, to be feeling the best that you feel when you get to the game day. And in this case, that means it's physically It's technically making sure that over the course of the week, we get through all the things that we want to do, that we need to do. And the day before the game is a quick review of everything, and specifically the lineups that we're going to play for the game tomorrow. The way that I organise my practices during the week are that I will mix the teams from day to day, from drill to drill. We always with some kind of reason. I want the two receivers to play together. I want the best spikers to play against the best middles. I want the setter and the opposite to work together. There's always something in there that we're working on, and wanting to keep the teams to be roughly equal strength for every drill, so that all the competitive parts of the week are competitive. And so not ever playing first six against second six. This will be the only session of the week where I would typically have a first six on the team on the court together. In this case, it's the team at the near end who are getting their reps, so to speak. The structure of the drill is that we stay in one rotation for 2 series of serve plus free ball, where they get a chance to, again, practice all of the interactions and most of the plays that they're going to run tomorrow. Might only be 1 or 2 reps in each situation. I can always give in extra balls. I can always say which ball that I want them to practice. The next one has to be first tempo. The next one has to be position 4. We always have the opportunity to repeat actions where there's a difficulty, but basically we just want to go through everything maybe once. The change that I've made here is a change that I'm planning to make for tomorrow's match, which is the setter and opposite double sub. So I've practiced that, and of course that's not something that we would ever do during the week. Not of course, but I can tell you that we don't. And so because it was something that we don't do that often, I wanted to at least go through it one time before the big match the next day. You'll see a lot of service errors, or you might notice a lot of service errors. That's part of the practice. The number of errors that we make the number of service errors that we make in practice isn't something that I focus a lot on. I always want the players to be making their best serve in whatever the situation is. And there's a really strong tendency among players to serve easy in drills because nobody likes it when the play stops. Nobody likes it when they're waiting for the next ball to come in. And so I actually really push them to not make easy serves and to not force the time in between the rallies, so that every one that we have is a real serve. The game also includes service errors. So we also have to practice calling in and out, letting balls go that are out, changing focus from a rally that didn't happen to a rally that does. So that's all stuff that we're learning and practicing as we go along. You'll notice the second ball doesn't come in very fast. That's deliberate on my part. In a game, once the ball is dead, there's never another ball coming in. So the situation is already unrealistic. And if the coach tries to force some action that's a really artificial action to improve reactions or increase reactions, I don't think that the outcome of that is useful at all. So there's a little balance between where the moment that the rally ends, the players naturally eyes follow the ball that's being played because that's the way they play the game, and then there's a moment where they have a chance to refocus on the unnatural action that's about to happen, and then you can put the coach can put the ball in. On this day, in this situation, i.e. the day before the game, I can err on the side of being a little bit slower than I might be on the Tuesday or Wednesday during the week. You might also notice that that's me on the left here. If you don't know who I am, the one who nearly fell over on that last trying to be a football player. You might notice that I'm not standing behind the court in the traditional best angle. Couple of reasons for that being, one is that during the match, you don't watch the game from behind the court angle, and you have to practice seeing the game, understanding it, and making decisions from that view. So the first one is the theoretical view, for example, or perhaps described as. The other one I find is a practical reason, is that from around that point, sometimes even closer to the net, then I am better able to talk to everybody on the court. If I'm standing behind the court, then basically everything that happens on the other side of the net, I have to shout, and with echo and background noise and whatever else is going on, there's no guarantee that the players on the far side of the court will really ever hear, or certainly take in anything that I have to say. And perhaps I'm a little bit arrogant in thinking that the things I say in practice should be taken in and acted on by the players, but if that's the case, so be it. I don't say too much, but what I say needs to be understood by everybody so that everybody remains on the same page. Might take a moment here to, in the pre-convention notes, I mentioned that I will talk very briefly about some training theories. You'll see a bit more detail in the notes. I'm not going to go through everything in big detail, but if you're interested in the theoretical underpinning of the work that you see here today, and remembering that that the tempo is a little bit different and some of the small specifics are different, but what you're basically seeing is one of my practices from any day of the week. So keep that in mind. The theoretical underpinning of this form of practice, i.e. without any sort of blocked or repetitive practice, there's a few areas that you can research if you don't already know. The first one is constraints-led theory. Constraints-led theory is a new jargon. It's I learned it at university in the early 90s as game sense theory, or teaching games for understanding, and it's actually goes back to the 70s. And the basic idea being that you use games and the rules of the games to teach players how to play in some sense, but also the technical components of the game. So you might be able to, and I don't like to put words into John's mouth, but the game teaches the game is, I think, an offshoot or an outcome of constraints-led theory. Another one that I've come across recently is the optimal theory of learning, which is a very popular theory that goes around right now. There's a very popular book by Nick Winkelman, or Winkelman is American, which goes through this in quite some detail. I'm not all over it, but from what I understand, it's a similar, well, the outcome of it is similar to the constraints-led theory. And the most interesting one that I have come across in the last couple of months, that something that really resonated with me, and the things that I've worked over the 20 odd years that I've been working with athletes at this level, is a thing called complex systems principles. And basically, if you've followed some of my work or writings or theorizings, possibly, I talk a lot about the interactions between people, the interactions between the phases of the game, the technical elements, and the complex systems principles seems to really neatly and scientifically follow or explain what I have been seeing, or what I've seen or interpreted in the game over the years. And I think that is a particularly interesting direction to look at the game, and something that I personally will be researching more when more stuff comes up. Those things are in the notes that you have. In addition, there's a link to a YouTube talk that Harjeet Singh, who is, I think, is quite famous in volleyball circles as a skill learning specialist. He did a video podcast with a colleague of mine, John Foreman, basically going through some of the theoretical jargons, the theoretical explanations for how we practice. He doesn't talk about complex systems, but he does talk about constraints-led. He does talk about optimal learning, and some of the other terms that get bandied a lot about. So follow that link, and if you're unsure about what any of these things means, then it's a good one to go through and understand really quickly and easily. So this part of the training session is still going on in the background, still with some service errors. The day before the game would be, normally this would go for about 25 minutes. I would go through the rotations once or twice, depending on how I feel about things in general. You'll see in the corner the players not on the court sitting down. I don't have any problem with that, unless there's a lot of balls to be collected. But in the game, they'll sit down, and it's appropriate that they also practice that change of rhythm. One thing, we're playing by international rules here with liberos, and I'm sure that a lot of you who are playing with different rules use the liberos different ways in practice, but it's a fairly interesting conversation, I guess, maybe is one way to put it, about how we should use the middles and liberos in practice. A lot of coaches will take out the middle at the very first opportunity. As soon as one ball is dead, they'll put in the libero for all the extra balls. Some coaches will even not have the libero play defense after their own serve. The middle blocker not even playing defense after their own serve. I like to leave the middle in to finish the action that he's a part of. So the serve and any extra balls that come in while he is serving, then or while he's in that serving rotation, then he'll stay in and have at least a few repetitions at defense and transition. That's one of those moments that in hindsight I'm not super excited about. I don't like players playing the ball with their feet under anything except the most unusual circumstances. I have 30 seconds or here where we can move straight on. We have a little bit more of the rotational work, especially the day before a match. We will change ends so that everybody has a chance to serve, receive, attack, block at both ends. And again, especially if we are not playing at home. The reality is that most players have played in most gyms in the league, but there's always one or two players who are seeing something for the first time and need to get used to the different eye lines, the different backgrounds that they're going to have to be working with. I actually have had one setter who had quite some difficulty, which he didn't feel, but we noticed in the basically in the statistics that there was quite a difference when he was playing home and away from home, or in gyms that he hadn't played a lot in before. And like I said, he didn't feel it, but the difference was there, and we changed our practice the day before the game a little bit to give him more chance to get used to all those different eye lines, all those different things that he has to see. So we come to the end of the official part of the practice, and the last can be anything up to half an hour in practice, but at this point of the practice, the idea is that the players have the chance to do the things that they feel they need to do to prepare themselves, they want to do to prepare themselves, and this is their moment to do that. As I mentioned earlier, the goal for the practice, or the goal for the week, is to feel good in every way that can be to when they arrive on game day. So obviously, again, there's a physical, a technical, a tactical component to those things, but every player has a routine, has some things that they do to make themselves feel good. It can be some extra receptions, it can be some extra attack, some extra serve, some other little sequence that they may or may not have. Some players like to not do anything very much the day before the game to make sure that they're feeling strong and sharp for that important competition. As a coach, if you're trying to do everything, trying to do all of the things that make everybody happy, you can end up with firstly not getting through everything because everybody's a little bit different, and you're trying to cater to 14 guys. Secondly, you can have a really long session, which will just end up making everybody tired and bored and a little bit unhappy that they've had to go through such a long session. So really good solution I found for this is to open it up, let the players make their own choices. They also, in this time, they help each other. So they're working on things between them. It's building some kind of building a mutual cooperation with each other to get ready for the games. And I really like this way of finishing the last session. Coaches are available to do whatever needs to be done, to give in a ball here, a ball there. A lot of players like to receive float serves on the last session with a coach standing on a box, or sometimes can be that the serving machine will come out at this point. So in the last 5 minutes or so of the practice, it will start to wind down here. One thing that a lot of the time I will also use the whistle for serving in this period. Today I didn't, to let the players work at their own tempo. You can see guys slowly, they get their one extra rep and call it a day. So if I take the chance to do a quick review, the object of the week's practice is to prepare for the game on the day 7. So that means physical, technical, tactical, and over the course of the week, that's what we'll do, building up to the game day and what we do the day before the game. On the game day, players should feel the best that they feel all week. So if you've done your programming, your microcycle programming well, then the effects of the heavy training will have worn off. On the morning of the game day, they might be still a tiny bit flat, but when they come to the afternoon, evening game, they should be on top of the adrenaline, ready to jump out of their skin. And that's always the jumping out of the skin is something that a phrase that I use to myself in thinking about how the week works. The practice session itself, I've edited down to about the 45 minutes that we have, but it's not a very long session. So for me, even including this last part, it would rarely, if ever, go more than an hour and 30 minutes, and is preceded by the first video preparation. So we have the video preparation before this practice. So they're really, in some sense, the week's practice is finished and the pre-game has begun. Probably should have mentioned that at the start. The warm-up, the players have some freedom over the warm-up close to game day. We will do some pepper, even if it's not something that I particularly like doing. And I reiterate that I would never do that drill if I were coaching juniors. I would always find something else to do in the first part of practice that was much, much closer to the game and the way that we need to prepare the game. We can have some fun games to build attention, to put the guys into a good mood, a mood that has them physically and mentally ready for work. And if you're able to test them in some way, for example, with a 2-ball game, then that can help as well. The main training session or the main training drill, the main teaching drill for me is the one that we saw with giving the ball directly to the setter. It doesn't have to be like that. The ball from the coach can come as a free ball. It can come as a second contact or a first contact instead of a zero contact. So those are the options that we have. I'd like to remind you also of constraints-led theory, optimal learning theory, complex systems principles, as in how we put our training sessions together. I think it's important that we're comfortable with understanding what those things are all about. And my video tells me, my video was my clock, that I've just reached the 45-minute mark. And so I will thank you for your attention up till now. I will be available to answer questions at the appropriate juncture. Thanks again for your attention. Good luck with all of your coaching, and I hope that I'm able to come here soon in person to personally experience this amazing coaching event that the AVC normally put on in person, but this year have done virtually. So thanks again. We'll talk soon.